June 6, 1944. 6:31 hours. Normandy coast, near Colleville-sur-Mer. The sea is still vomiting men. Grey water slams into the shingle beach, dragging bodies, rifles, helmets, some moving, some very still back toward the channel. Smoke lies low, oily and black, clinging to the ground as if afraid to rise. A German machine gunner presses his cheek into the cold steel of air. MG-42, the barrel already hot enough to shimmer the air. He can hear them now, shouting. Whistles. The strange, clipped English words carried over the surf. Americana. You can almost feel the disbelief tightening in his chest. They were not supposed to land here like this. Not in daylight. Not in waves that kept coming even as the water turned red. Lieutenant Franz Killer, 24 years old, Bavarian, university educated, a reservist Turk. Frontline officer lowers his binoculars just long enough to wipe seawater from the lenses. What he sees does not match what he has been told for years. These men are not cowards, they are not soft, they are not running, they are dying and still coming. This moment, this first violent collision on the beaches of France is where many German perceptions of the American soldier begin to fracture, not shatter. Fracture. Because what Germans thought about Americans in World War II was never simple. It was a shifting mix of propaganda, arrogance, curiosity, envy, fear, and eventually, grudging respect. But to understand that moment on the beach, you have to go back to what Germans believed before they ever fired a shot at an American. Berlin, 1941. A classroom with tall windows and peeling paint. A Hitler youth instructor slaps a chalkboard with the flat of his hand. On it is a crude drawing, a fat man in a helmet, chewing gum, surrounded by dollar signs. This, he says, is the American soldier. The boys laugh. The caricature is familiar. It appears in newspapers, posters, newsreels. The American is portrayed as wealthy but weak. Industrial, yes, but decadent. Technologically advanced, but lacking discipline. A nation of shopkeepers and movie stars, not warriors. German propaganda draws sharp contrasts. The lance of the German infantryman is disciplined, hardened by history, descended from Teutonic knights and Prussian drill masters. The American, by comparison, is a product of comfort. Too much food. Too much jazz, too many opinions. The phrase circulates quietly among officers in the early years of the war. Die Amerikaner haben keine Kriegstradition. The Americans have no tradition of war. It is a dangerous assumption. Even before the United States officially enters the war, German intelligence reports note America's industrial potential with unease. But industry is not the same as fighting spirit, or so many believe. Tanks can be built, planes can be assembled, but courage, endurance, the willingness to suffer, those are harder to mass produce. In 1942, as German forces fight the Red Army in the frozen hell of the Eastern Front, the Americans still feel distant, abstract, a rumor across an ocean. German soldiers joke about them. They will arrive late, one sergeant says. They will fight cautiously, says another. They will quit when the losses become serious. Even seasoned officers echo the sentiment. Colonel General Alfred Jodl himself reportedly dismisses American ground troops as untested, predicting they will lack the ruthless efficiency of the Wehrmacht. Then come the bombers. August 17, 1943, 10:03 hours, over Schweinfurt, Germany. The sky is wrong. That is the first thing Oberfeldwebel Karl Weiss notices. It is crowded, not with clouds, but with aircraft. Dozens, then hundreds silver shapes glinting in the sun. The sound arrives seconds later, a deep, rolling thunder that vibrates through bone and concrete. B-17 flying fortresses. They fly in tight formations, box after box, bristling with machine guns. Weiss has seen British bombers before night raiders, ghostly and distant. These are different. These are brazen. Daylight attackers, coming straight through German airspace as if daring the Luftwaffe to stop them. Anti-aircraft guns open fire. Black flak blossoms around the formations. Fighters scream upward to intercept. And still, the bombers hold formation. You can almost feel the unease spreading among the German defenders. Planes are hit, some explode, some peel away trailing smoke, but most keep coming. Bomb bay doors open. The earth below begins to convulse. Factories vanish in fire and steel. Later, In the ruins, German civilians speak of the Americans with a new tone. Fear edges into the language. These are not timid men hiding behind machines. These crews fly into hell knowingly, repeatedly. Downed American airmen begin to appear captured, wounded, sometimes lynched by enraged civilians, sometimes marched through streets under guard. German soldiers get their first close look. They are younger than expected. Many barely 20. Some are confident, even cocky. Others are visibly terrified. A few smile nervously. One asks for a cigarette. Weiss offers him one. The American thanks him in halting German, learned, he explains, from a high school teacher in Ohio.
Ohio.
The word sounds absurdly distant. This is the first crack. North Africa, 1942, near Kasserine Pass. If the bombers challenge German assumptions from the sky, the American ground forces do so brutally on land. At first, it seems to confirm every prejudice. The U.S. Army's early encounters with the Afrika Korps are frankly a mess. Poor coordination, inexperienced officers, units that break under pressure. German commanders like Erwin Rommel exploit these weaknesses mercilessly. After Kasserine, German officers write scathing assessments. American troops are described as undisciplined, tactically naive, over-reliant on equipment. Rommel himself reportedly notes that Americans fight with great courage but little skill. The phrase spreads. German soldiers mock the Americans' abundance of supplies, the chocolate, the canned meat, the cigarettes. They loot abandoned positions and marvel at the quality of boots, radios, rations. Luxury soldiers, one lancer mutters. But even here, something doesn't quite fit the stereotype. American units, after being mauled, do not collapse entirely. They regroup, they adapt, they replace commanders, they learn fast. Within months, the same German officers who scoffed at American incompetence begin to note improvements. Artillery becomes more accurate. Air-ground coordination tightens. Attacks show planning, not just enthusiasm. And the Americans keep coming. Losses that would have shattered smaller armies are absorbed, replaced, reinforced. Behind every American soldier seems to stand an endless logistical machine. For the first time, German soldiers begin to understand that they are not just fighting men, but a system. Italy, 1943. A farmhouse near Salerno. Night. Unteroffizier Hans Becker crouches in the shadows listening. There it is again. Metal clinking softly. Boots on stone. Whispered English voices. The Americans are probing, always probing. They do not attack recklessly tonight. Instead, they send small patrols, testing wire, counting steps, learning terrain. Becker feels a flicker of something unfamiliar. Respect. The Americans fight differently from the British. Less rigid, less formal. Junior officers take initiative. NCOs make decisions on the spot. When plans go wrong, they improvise rather than freeze. Captured Americans confirm it. They speak freely, sometimes too freely, about their units, their homes, their training. German interrogators are surprised. The Americans are not afraid in the way expected. They are nervous, yes, but also confident that if they survive today, tomorrow will bring more men, more supplies, more chances. One German intelligence officer writes a quiet note in a report. Der amerikanische Soldat glaubt an den Sieg. The American soldier believes in victory. Belief is contagious. Normandy again. June 1944, afternoon. Back on the bluffs, Lieutenant Franz Keller watches as American troops finally breach the German defenses. Engineers blow gaps in wire. Infantry pour through. Tanks crawl ashore, improbably intact. The Americans are disorganized. Units are mixed. Officers shout conflicting orders, and still they advance. Keller orders a withdrawal inland. It is not panic, it is calculation. To stay is to be surrounded. As he retreats, he passes wounded Americans being treated by medics under fire. The medics wear red crosses and do not carry rifles. They kneel in the open, hands slick with blood, focused entirely on the men in front of them. Keller hesitates. He has been taught that Americans lack discipline, that they fight for money, not ideals, that they will fold under real pressure. What he sees instead are men who, despite chaos, fear, and horrific losses, refuse to start moving forward. Later that night, exhausted and shaken, Keller writes in his diary by candlelight, "We underestimated them. They are not good soldiers yet, but they will be." He underlines the sentence. Across France, similar realizations are taking place. In hedgerows, villages, forests, and shattered towns, German soldiers encounter Americans at close range, sometimes as enemies, sometimes as prisoners, sometimes as uneasy neighbors during brief lulls in fighting. They notice things. The Americans joke under fire. They swear constantly. They carry photos of girlfriends and movie stars. They share food even with prisoners. They are not the automatons of propaganda, nor are they the pampered weaklings. They are something more dangerous, adaptable. And as summer turns toward autumn, and the Allied advance grinds forward, a darker question begins to circulate quietly among German ranks. If these men are learning this fast, what will they be like next year? The answer is coming. In the forests of the Ardennes, in the snow, in a last, desperate gamble that will test every belief. The Germans still hold about the American soldier, and this time there will be no room left for illusion. October 10th, 1934, 4:47 hours. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Rain seeps through everything. It clings to wool uniforms, turns dirt into sucking mud, and carries the smell of rotting leaves and cordite deep into the lungs. Visibility is measured in meters. Sound behaves strangely here, gunfire echoes and bends, making it impossible to tell direction or distance. Gefreiter Otto Brandt tightens his grip on his Carabiner 98K. Somewhere ahead, an American patrol is moving. He knows this, not because he sees them, but because the forest feels disturbed. Branches snap. Metal taps wood. A muffled cough. The Americans are close. A year ago, Brandt might have felt confident, even smug. This forest, this terrain, favors defenders. German troops know how to bleed an attacker dry, but now his stomach knots, because these Americans are not the same ones he heard about in Africa, or even Normandy. These men have learned. The Hürtgen forest is where many German soldiers first realize something deeply unsettling. American adaptability is no longer theoretical. It is lethal. American units move cautiously here, painfully so. They advance yard by yard, mapping minefields, coordinating artillery strikes with obsessive precision. Engineers crawl forward under fire, clearing paths that seem impossible. German defenders still inflict terrible casualties. Entire American companies are shredded by well-hidden machine gun nests and pre-registered artillery. The forest becomes a graveyard of broken men and shattered equipment. And yet the Americans do not disengage. They rotate units. They bring up fresh divisions. They adjust tactics. When frontal assaults fail, they flank. When flanking fails, they flatten entire grid squares with artillery. A German officer writes bitterly in a letter home, "They fight the forest itself." This is not bravery in the romantic sense. It is persistence. Industrialized persistence. A willingness to accept losses in pursuit of long-term gain. For German soldiers, raised on the idea of decisive battles and swift victories, this kind of warfare feels alien and terrifying. A captured farmhouse near Aachen. November 1944. Inside, a handful of German prisoners sit on benches, hands bound. An American guard stands watch, chewing gum. He cannot be older than 19. Unterfeldwebel Wilhelm Krüger studies him quietly. The boy hums to himself, a tune Krüger doesn't recognize. American, jazzy, incongruous amid the ruins. "What do you think happens to us?" Krüger asks in English. The guard shrugs. "War ends. You go home. Same as me." There is no malice in his voice, no triumph. Krüger has been taught that Americans hate Germans, that they will seek revenge for bombings, for U-boats, for Pearl Harbor's allies. Instead, this boy seems bored. Later, during interrogation, Krüger notices something else. The Americans are thorough but not cruel. They ask questions. They check answers. When he refuses to speak, they stop. He is fed, given cigarettes, a blanket. This too unsettles him. The enemy he was taught to fear is not the enemy he faces. The American way of war begins to reveal itself more clearly. German soldiers notice patterns. The Americans rely heavily on artillery, and it is devastating. Forward observers, often dangerously close to the front, call in fire with speed and accuracy that German units increasingly struggle to match. When Americans are pinned down, the response is not reckless charges but overwhelming firepower. They also notice the air power. Even on cloudy days, American fighter bombers JWs appear suddenly, screaming down on columns, crossroads, and retreating units. German movement in daylight becomes suicidal. A German saying spreads through the ranks: whenever we stop moving, the Americans are above us. Whenever we move, they find us. Morale begins to erode. Yet despite all this, the Americans are still seen as imperfect soldiers. They are loud. They reveal positions by shouting. Their night discipline is poor. They lack the quiet, predatory patience of seasoned Eastern Front veterans. German soldiers exploit these flaws when they can, but the margin for error is shrinking. December 16, 1944, 5:30 hours. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls thick and wet, muffling sound. The temperature bites through gloves and into bone. Engines rumble in the darkness as German forces surge forward in a final gamble. Unternehmen Wachte am Rhine. The Battle of the Bulge begins. German soldiers move with renewed purpose. Surprise is complete. American units are overrun in the opening hours. Roads clog with retreating vehicles. Command structures fracture. For a brief moment, old assumptions feel validated. They are collapsing, one German lieutenant says, grinning. They cannot fight without their supplies. Indeed, American units are cut off. Ammunition runs low. Food dwindles. Radios go silent, and yet something unexpected happens. American resistance hardens. Small units hold road junctions far longer than expected. Isolated pockets refuse to surrender. Engineers blow bridges under fire. Artillery units fire their last rounds before spiking guns and withdrawing on foot. In the town of Bastogne, surrounded and freezing, American paratroopers dig in. When German envoys demand surrender, the American response is short. Nuts. The word spreads quickly through German lines. At first it is laughed at, then puzzled over, then quietly respected. These men are supposed to be encircled, doomed, and yet they defy protocol, expectation, logic. A German officer later writes, "We realized then that the Americans did not always know when they were beaten." A snow-covered foxhole near St. Vith. Gefreiter Otto Brandtolder now, thinner, harder peers, through binoculars, at an American position across a frozen field. He watches as a wounded American is dragged back under fire by two comrades. They do not leave him. Brandt remembers the early days of the war, when such acts were rare. When survival meant abandoning the weak, the Americans fight differently. They value the individual soldier in a way the German army no longer can afford. This too is dangerous, because soldiers who believe they matter fight harder. As the Bulge collapses and German forces retreat once more, the shift in perception becomes undeniable. American soldiers are no longer dismissed as amateurs. They are now viewed as formidable, especially in defense. German intelligence summaries begin to change tone. American troops are described as tenacious, resourceful, highly motivated when under pressure. Their weaknesses are still noted, but now, so are their strengths. And perhaps most unsettling of all, their morale remains high, even as casualties mount. They believe the war will end, and that they will win. For German soldiers, facing shortages, constant retreat, and a leadership increasingly divorced from reality, this belief becomes a psychological weapon. But there is one final, bitter realization yet to come, one that will crystallize German opinions of the American soldier forever. It will not come in a battle. It will come when the shooting stops. March 7, 1945, 14:22 hours. Rimegen, Germany. The bridge is still standing. Smoke drifts lazily over the Rhine, mixing with the smell of cordite and burning oil. For a few stunned seconds, no one on either side quite believes what they're seeing. The Ludendorff Bridge, intended to be destroyed long before the enemy arrived, has survived the demolition charges, and the Americans are running for it. German defenders fire desperately, bullets cracking off steel girders. Explosives detonate, tearing chunks from the structure, but not enough. American infantry sprint across, bent low, boots pounding metal, shouting to one another in raw, urgent voices. You can almost feel the moment snap. For years, the Rhine has been more than a river. It is a psychological barrier. A symbol, the last line. And now American soldiers are across it. For many German soldiers and civilians alike, this is the moment the war truly ends, even if the fighting does not. Inside a ruined house overlooking the bridge, Hauptmann Ernst Vogler lowers his field glasses slowly. He does not curse. He does not shout. He simply exhales. They did it, he says to no one in particular. What Vogler feels is not just defeat. It is clarity. The Americans have not won because they are braver, or smarter, or more ruthless. They have won because they are relentless, and because they have been allowed to adapt, correct mistakes, and preserve their soldiers' will to fight. This realization spreads quietly through German ranks in the final weeks of the war. There is no longer much talk of soft Americans. No more jokes about chocolate and jazz. Those belong to another time, another war. Now the Americans are spoken of carefully, warily. April 1945, a road near Leipzig. A long column of German prisoners marches under American guard. They are a study in exhaustion, ragged uniforms, hollow eyes, hands swollen from cold and labor. An American MP walks alongside them, rifle slung casually. He chats with another guard, laughing at something unheard. Obergefreiter Lucas Meyer watches him. This is the strangest part, Meyer thinks. The casualness. The Americans have won, yet they do not behave like conquerors, at least not in the way German soldiers were taught to expect. They enforce discipline, yes, but they do not humiliate, they do not starve prisoners, they do not beat them, not systematically. Meyer remembers stories from the Eastern Front. What surrender meant there, what captivity looked like. Compared to that, this feels almost unreal. A German Perdalu near him mutters, if we had captured them, we would be dead men. No one contradicts him. In makeshift POW camps, conversations happen that would have been unthinkable months earlier. German soldiers talk with American guards about home, about farms in Iowa, about cities like Detroit and Chicago, about baseball and cars and factories that never seem to stop. The Americans talk about the war ending soon, about going home, about college on the GI Bill. The contrast is stark. German soldiers begin to understand that the American soldier is not fighting for conquest or ideology in the same way. He is fighting to end the war and return to a life that still exists. That difference matters. It explains much. But respect does not come without bitterness. Among German veterans, especially those who fought from 1939 onward, there is resentment, a sense that the Americans arrived late, when Germany was already bleeding, that they enjoyed overwhelming material superiority, that they crushed Germany with factories rather than genius. There is truth in this, and also denial, because deep down, many German soldiers know something else. They were not beaten only by machines. They were beaten by an army that learned faster than expected, that decentralized decision-making, that trusted NCOs, that rotated units instead of grinding them into nothing, and perhaps, most unsettling of all, they were beaten by soldiers who believed the system behind them would not abandon them. May 8, 1945, 23:01 hours, somewhere in Bavaria. The radio crackles, static, then a voice. The war in Europe is over. Unteroffizier Hans Becker sits on a wooden crate in a barn now serving as a temporary holding area. He feels empty. Across the room, an American sergeant lights a cigarette and offers one to Becker. Becker hesitates, then accepts. They smoke in silence. Becker thinks back to everything he once believed about Americans. The caricatures, the jokes, the certainty of superiority, all wrong, not because Americans were perfect soldiers, but because war is not won by perfection. It is won by adaptation, belief, and endurance. The American soldier had all three. Years later, in Postwar interviews and memoirs, German veterans are asked a simple question: what did you think of the Americans? The answers vary. Some are grudging, some generous, some still defensive. But one theme returns again and again. They were better than we expected. Sometimes it is phrased more bluntly. We underestimated them. And for soldiers trained to believe in their own invincibility, that underestimation proved fatal. Final thought. What Germans really thought about American soldiers in World War II was not a single opinion. It was a journey from arrogance to surprise, from contempt to caution, from dismissal to respect. It was a lesson learned too late, because by the time German soldiers truly understood who the Americans were, those Americans were already across the Rhine, already in their cities, already ending the war. And history, as always, belonged to the ones who adapted fastest.